Now the Hollywood Reporter has seemingly outed the two actresses' names and pretty much being bullied to respond. As TMZ is now reporting, of course witnesses are staying anonymous. They're terrified of threats and bullying. Now this smells like Blake's PR team trying to spin why they're not coming forward.
Blake Lively is in complete chaos after a shrewd Hollywood reporter dropped the truth in such a brutal way that it put her image in chaos. What appeared to be a basic magazine cover turned out to be a brutal assault printed in glossy that exposed her as never before. It's true that she's been afflicted by backlash before, and this time, this isn't just bad news the way it is, it's career-ending. All of this was revealed in the event that the Hollywood Reporter unveiled its February 22nd cover. Let's declare that the image alone sent the waves across Hollywood. The design? Pure gold. The video showed Blake Lively launching a slingshot at Justin Baldoni. It was as if we'd traveled back in time to the medieval era, where dispute resolution wasn't done by a courtroom, but using guns made of cartoons. Ladies, she's in, and there are a ton of Twitter complaints. Some of which, 2 or 3, are awry and shouldn't be allowed to exist. However, a few ones are right on. The amount of absurdity out of the ordinary. If the aim was to make her appear totally ridiculous, then congrats, you've accomplished your mission. It wasn't a subliminal joke. It was a full and open expose of her whole act. However, instead of taking ownership of the moment and standing strong, Blake's staff went into a rage. The team reacted, blasting the magazine as being offensive and sexist. Naturally, that when circumstances don't work out your way, it's easy to use the card of discrimination. The statement said that the image could be a risky way to reinforce stereotypes that women are not able to, are vocal. Let's face it for a moment. In the event that this happens to be the fight you're deciding to take on, perhaps your arguments aren't so strong as you thought. Of all the issues you can criticize, the issue is an illustration. This is where it gets much more entertaining. Instead of providing actual evidence for their assertions, Blake's group took the usual outrage path and hoped to create an online storm and have the internet in their corner. What's the problem? Internet users didn't fall for the opportunity. Instead of being sympathetic, they shout at the absurdity of this all. That same person who's always exhorting people to be a tough, self-reliant force fell in a cartoon? The same woman who teaches women to stick up for themselves and stand up for themselves is now in a—
Even if Justin was too huggy or whatever the heck, or said she was sexy, none of this warrants this. And you still have to atone for what you did.
This isn't just funny, it's embarrassing. In the present, rather than appearing as a confident and unshakable woman, her appearance is more delicate as ever. The most shocking aspect? It didn't end with the hilarious art and went further, way deeper. The piece drew the curtains on an issue that turned the entire narrative. The story delved into the Baha'i beliefs of Justin Baldoni as well, and the story that was presented as a straightforward incident of sexual harassment turned out to be much more like a huge cultural mistake. However, did the team of Blake even bother to respond to this story? Nope. Instead of responding by presenting facts instead, they immediately went into defensive mode and launched the full force of a savage attack against the Hollywood Reporter, as they thought that questioning the journalist's side of the story is an unforgivable offense. The evidence was not new, and there was no proof at all. It was plain, unfiltered anger. The plan of attack? Simple. Shout enough to make sure that nobody is able to tell how shaky the argument is. Yet exactly the reverse happened. Instead of winning an unblind supporter and gaining support from the public, backlash revealed the shakiness of her case actually was. If ever was an opportunity to look back, reconsider to think of a better solution, this was it. What did Blake take? She redoubled her efforts, digging her deeper and deeper in a puddle she could never get out of. When Baldoni's religion was brought into the debate, the article totally changed the perception of people about the controversy. Instead of making assumptions about the worst regarding Baldoni and his family, the story forced everyone to ponder whether perhaps the actions he took weren't so bad even at all. Perhaps they were misinterpreted with Hollywood's hypersensitive lens. The whole thing ruined Blake's perspective. Instead of even considering the possibility of this happening, Blake did what she does best, played as the victim and ignored every subtlety, and stayed with the same old screenplay. What's the problem? Nobody's listening anymore. People aren't consuming the scream of the moon this time around. In fact, each incident in the scandal simply confirms one thing. Blake Lively isn't looking like the strong, confident woman she says she is. The actress is looking desperate, and Hollywood notices the signs. Blake Lively's staff are in full panic mode, screaming, flailing, and making up ridiculous accusations as if they're their only hope of survival. Each attempt at controlling the narrative is just screaming damage control with a smooch. The more forcefully they go, the harder the situation gets. Instead of proving Blake is deserving of the respect she is due, Blake is exposing herself as a person who is unable to take the heat. What's the funny thing is, as she attempts to avoid scrutiny, the more she is the focal point of all. Faith? There was a time when the public was blindly trusting Blake Lively, but that dedication was gone after a second obvious flaws started to emerge in her life.
I found that incredibly telling. Hidden in a little footnote, her protection that, well, I was told they were lawfully obtained. Yikes. Big yikes.
Instead of defending her claim, she removed key text messages in her amended lawsuit. Text messages that, had they been kept intact, could blow her entire story into fragments. It wasn't a harmless alteration. This was an intentional decision, a desperate effort to hide any flaws in her story, in order to keep the illusion for a bit longer. Did it really succeed? Not even close. Instead of helping her defend her claim, this shrewd omission caused alarms. The whole scenario seemed to be a lie, and it made evident that the facts might not be as secure as she had wanted the public to be convinced. What about the media? They took off. The media smashed through her assertions like vultures on carcasses, uncovering the flaws in her claims each time they published a new story. The story that was initially presented as a solid, airtight argument began becoming the fragile thread of fiction. However, here's the part that gets even more shakier. The more Blake is able to push her own version of the events, and the more apparent it appears that her legal strategy isn't as secure as a deck of cards during a storm. It's not a valid matter, and more of an Hollywood production, and Blake trying to hold the focus on the truth. What about legal experts? They're observing this drama unfold, and let's be honest, they're not thrilled. Instead of providing a strong argument backed by evidence, Blake is constantly shifting her story as if a magician pulls tricks from her bottomless bucket. At this point, the sudden shifts appear more like a shrewd legal strategy and more like an impulsive attempt to cover up her own trails. Blake Lively's legal strategy has been going so fast that it's almost falling off the cliff. This constant fumbling around isn't only creating uncertainty in her appearance, but it's also making it obvious that she's completely out of her element and relying in smoke and mirrors instead of evidence-based data. If her credibility is already at risk, the erratic legal moves have been gnawing from it using a chainsaw, and Justin Baldoni's group, they're not playing. When Blake's group is scrambling to stop the story from unraveling, his side has been diligently removing every accusation using solid facts. The team has not made any speculations or unclear claims, but real-time receipts which directly refute Blake's account of the events. As they add over each other, the more depressing her appearance. There is more than just a disagreement between two people anymore. It's a very real review. In the present, Blake's trial doesn't seem to be a search for justice. This is looking increasingly like an attempt to prevent the story from getting away from her. There's also social media. The tide is turning in such a short time, Blake must be feeling the pain. That initial focus on unwavering backing has now turned into an outright backlash. Posts that are sarcastic, memes along with ferocious commentaries have transformed her legal struggle into an internet prank. The public isn't simply questioning her statements no more. They're doing a mockery of her every move. Instead of supporting the social media community, it drags her story of events in the mud, which makes it obvious the attempt she made to control the debate has not worked in the most defensible way. When you believe that it can't be any worse, her legal team performs a desperate trick and files an amended complaint ahead of the deadline. An act so unintentionally urgent, it could just as well come with a blinking neon warning that reads, "We're trying to get our feet wet."
There's not a shred of evidence to support it. Really? 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 It was just because of the way he is culturally with his religion. I want to go through some of these pieces because hear me out. Here it is. So from the outset, the feud's been framed as the newest chapter in Hollywood's ongoing fight for gender equality.
While they did not bring any sense of clarity to the matter, Blake's team performed exactly the opposite. They added additional vague claims of defamation in an attempt to portray Justin Baldoni as the main antagonist in the already ridiculous show. As if to make their case appear more convincing, they abruptly made up allegations that some of the women who were on set were uncomfortable. However, They did not provide even a single speck of evidence that could prove it. In the present, the litigation is becoming like a lengthy, overdramatic speech with no basis. Each new turn within this saga of incompetence is only a way to strengthen Blake Lively's image as someone who's not just playing the part of. She's mastered manipulative skills, as well as the constant legal tactics and the obvious insanity, and constantly attempting to alter the facts. The whole thing boils down to one factor. The issue isn't one of justice, it's all about the control. No matter how much she attempts to make the situation work to her advantage, the flaws in her work are so massive that it's impossible to ignore. There's also the deleted texts, which are the smoking guns that discredits her credibility. It's true that the messages were removed from her amended suit speaks volumes about the fragility of her story is. Certain of the deleted documents clearly suggest that her lawyers made claims that were exaggerated beyond what is actually possible. Instead of making a convincing evidence-based case that was well documented, Blake chose to sanitize her own personal records in an attempt to keep control of the story, which is quickly dissolving. However, here's what's really important. Baldoni's team has already provided an explanation for the messages not being delivered. What's that contextualization? Devastating. It's impossible to doubt. Her account of events is based on unsubstantiated facts. This isn't a trivial mistake. It's a huge signal that could undermine the very foundations of her assertions. What about legal experts? They didn't waste time pointing this out. Removal of evidence that was crucial isn't an accident. This was a deliberate step, carefully planned to conceal the flaws within the case. Instead of helping her, it only proved what everybody was beginning to think was a possibility. Blake does not want to seek justice. Blake is trying her best to stop her illusion from breaking down. The fact that these important texts were deleted have only increased the doubt that Blake's assertions were not as solid like she had claimed them to be. In fact, her choice to erase crucial facts is stronger than any other accusation she's made. This suggests that she is unsure regarding whether the claims she's made stand up with the truth. Cold and hard. It's as if she feared that if these claims were exposed to the public and exposed, the entire narrative would fall apart into an avalanche of contradictions and unverifiable fabrications.
Even before It Ends With Us, Baldoni wasn't afraid to interject elements of his religion on the set. He did talk about his religion a lot, says a source, on 5 Feet Apart. This had shades of Scientology, but with less of the prominence and people hovering at the times. I think that's being mean. Nothing I've done makes it anywhere near the criminal accusations and things that Scientology does, so.
This blunder, as well as desperate and transparent, did nothing more than tarnish her standing. Instead of showing the truth that she's fighting to defend justice, she's confirming the very perception that many are beginning to believe, as if she's who is fumbling around trying to hold her crumbling story in order. While Blake was busy cleaning up untruths and omissions from her story, Justin Baldoni's defense took the initiative. The team didn't relax and absorb the hammer. They reacted in a brazen way, dismantling every one of her unsubstantiated claims one by one. Through a careful and powerful legal plan, the team of Baldoni made sure that no stone was left unturned, consistently presenting proof that completely contradicts Blake's allegations. The man who led the fight? Brian Friedman. An imposing attorney known for his tough approach to litigation, Friedman has been ruthless in exposing the weak arguments the Blake team has put in the mix. Friedman isn't just poking through her defense, the case is being ripped to pieces. This is a masterpiece in the art of legal savvy. Friedman and his associates have consistently built a case that does more than just defend Baldoni. It proves the actions he took weren't ill-advised in any way, but were wildly mistakenly. It's not just a matter of talking about it. They've supported their argument with an abundance of evidence. Calls, text messages, emails, and more, all lined perfectly with the story he claims. As Blake's team tries to ensure their narrative is firmly based, the Baldoni team has begun dropping receipts to show that honesty, not just the performance of the team, is what's winning the fight. The people who have access to the evidence have made one thing evident. Justin Baldoni is carrying receipts. A lot of receipts. The group he is working with has an array of vital messages that clearly prove the conduct of Justin Baldoni was professional. Each email, each message, and every exchange that is documented serves as proof that the actions of his team were merely genuine interactions that were twisted to become the guile of a team that is desperate to create an incident. In the meantime, Blake is scrambling to blame everything on a conflict in culture, but the factual evidence is driving her narrative straight to the floor, backed by each new bit of irrefutable evidence. Blake's narrative isn't only poor, but it's crumbling. Baldoni's team isn't just protecting his claims, they're bending the narrative. Their legal strategy is focused on proving that defamation is a cause of harm, and by the process, they're also exposing the bigger motives of her arguments. Here's the real kicker: Blake's inability to recognize diverse cultures. It's just as obvious as it's absurd. It's because, at the root of the matter, it's not really about misconduct, but an issue of misinterpretation.
Team Blake Lively may think they have the upper hand. Sources say she has no idea what's coming regarding her battle with Justin Baldoni.
His warm and friendly manner of speaking is a hallmark of his. His habit of hugging warmly, his welcoming expression of personality, has always been his method of making genuine connections. Friends have even said that his actions are caring and friendly. But instead of recognizing the situation as it did, Blake and her team picked specific moments for their story, leaving out the context and transforming his actions to make them appear like they did not. Instead of acknowledging the fact that there are cultural differences even in a multicultural business, Blake has weaponized discomfort by using it as an argument to support her allegations of misconduct. Instead of exploring the possibility of no underlying issue, the reporter is focusing on specific occasions to promote a narrative that is crumbling before the eyes of all. What's the most outrageous element? That a cultural misconception could be a reason for the amount of anger her actions have demonstrated, that her reasoning is as hollow as it is. Just when you thought the situation can't get more dire, there are reports suggesting that Blake Lively wasn't just involved in the film, but she was in charge of it in a sway. Instead of just being a passive player, she held a significant control of the production, making it more difficult to believe that she wasn't a victim in the scandal. In the background, Blake Lively wasn't just an actress in the lead role, but was also the director of the show and orchestrating an entire conflict of power that had no space for genuine cooperation. Instead of collaborating with the group, she was alleged to have created one demand that was unjustified following the other, and dictated each aspect of the script as well as filming process, as if every aspect of the production was solely for her own vision. By using her fame to her advantage and a sway over decisions, she manipulated them to her own will, controlling each and every aspect in the manner of an infamous Hollywood leader. The supposed cooperative effort was turned into an exercise in dictatorial behavior that saw control accumulated in the name of efficiency, and now, as a desperate effort to clean up her records, her lawyer masked the new claim as an unimportant tweak. However, the facts tell that the opposite is true. The proof of her dictatorial methods is clear. Even the most arduous legal strategy can change the factual events that transpired. The legal team of her is trying to spin her story, saying that the overreach was trying to establish the right environment for work. However, what about the team of Baldoni? They're refusing to let that excuse go. They've put an end to this argument by disclosing the true motive of her over-the-top involvement. Control is not the same as safety, not professionalism, simply the desire to be in control and control all things. What's the most disturbing part? The version that was released has her signature everywhere, an array of forced modifications that make you think power trip more than any real worry about the safety of the crew.
There's another possibility, one that has less to do with gender than it does with simple cultural misunderstandings. What if much of it, the alleged inappropriate hugging, which Blake mentioned in her new amended suit, the pre-filming praying, could be explained as a clash between a very specific, faith-driven community with its unique mores and a much more modern, post-Me Too one with its own set of beliefs and commandments?
Instead of fostering an open and respectful setting, her set was transformed to her own personal supreme power by twisting everything to suit her interpretation of the events. The issue wasn't fairness, it was not about justice. The goal was to alter the story to her advantage, regardless of how many individuals had to be bending to achieve it. The stark contrast between Justin Baldoni's thoughtful and culturally rich approach and Blake Lively's uncompromising control-driven behavior is so stark that it's hard to miss. His behavior, characterized by genuine warmth and emotion, might be viewed as unorthodox by some, however they weren't appropriate. However, Blake's strict control of the set, as well as her uncompromising demands, and her insistence on compromising make for a different impression. Instead of encouraging creative thinking, her set was run in a constant desire to control every aspect. Instead of collaborating with her team, she sat on every choice, like her power allowed her to control every aspect of the process, regardless of how many people she disengaged from the procedure. The goal wasn't to make the greatest film. It was about making sure that her idea was the only thing to be considered.
First thing I noticed is, as I compared it to the last one, a lot of texts were actually removed. This is the new document, as I made a note here, but as you'll notice here, this is the original complaint. As you can see, that first text is still there, but she removed, they removed quite a few texts.
Now, in the desperate effort to divert blame of her authoritarian actions, she's stuck to the notion of a clash between cultures. Like that's the only problem at hand. This is a classic denial. Instead of acknowledging that she transformed the setting into an intimidating environment, she's debunking a false narrative that the behavior of Baldoni, which is rooted in his faith in Baha'i and expressed in simple gestures of love, has been incorrectly interpreted. However, let's face it, this excuse for a weak cause is just an ineffective attempt to hide her manipulation tactics. Instead of acknowledging that her excessive control was at the root of the problem, her story is being twisted and pretending that cultural misunderstandings were to blame. Yet, nobody is believing the story. It's an obvious ploy to get attention that is a calculated attempt to hide her selfish agenda. At this point, all Blake Lively is proving is she's willing to say whatever it takes to get the spotlight back in the place she'd like it to be, and on her terms, regardless of how off from what's actually happening. Blake Lively's newest act, which is her rendition of the slow dance routine, could be only an attempt to change the history of dance. She claimed Justin Baldoni was adding insecure, unapproved gestures to her during filming, including leaning into the direction of her forehead, kissing it, as well as kissing her without her permission. However, here's where the issue lies. The footage of the incident completely does not match her account of the events. Evidence shows that she was completely active in the situation, including initiating the actions that she insists were in fact forced. Her team has never wavered. The film was designed to be intimate and an authentic depiction of an attraction between two people, not a situation of unwelcome advances. However, it was revealed that the Hollywood Reporter jumped into the scene, bringing the opinion of an expert who backed Blake's assertions. What's the catch? The so-called expert wasn't there. What makes someone who was not on set suddenly gain authoritative source on what occurred? This is just one more piece of the puzzle, which exposes the distorted narrative Blake has gotten.
Doesn't realize how lucky he is right now. We need to press on him how effing lucky. The whisper in the ear, the connotations, the JFC, other members feeling uncomfortable watching it. I mean, there's just so much.
Some critics don't like her attempts to alter the reality. Instead, they're exposing it as what it is. In an effort to make her case stronger by using fabrications and selective editing, twisting facts to suit her narrative of events. This is causing a lot of damage. And then there's the wild card, Jenny Slate. According to reports, she may have made an HR-related complaint with Baldoni. The problem is that the details are unclear. There is no way to know what exactly is the issue in this complaint. Some insiders speculate that the complaint may be in line with Blake's allegations, suggesting she felt uneasy working on the set. Many believe that this may increase the perception of a hostile workplace. However, others think that her issue has nothing to do with the legal fight. Here's the problem. Silence speaks volumes. Jenny Slate's lack of comment from the public is adding more ambiguity. Does she hesitate in order to help Blake's cause? Perhaps there's something more? If she does choose to give evidence, it may become a major game changer, whether it is confirming Lively's assertions or showing them as the overstatements they really are. In the meantime, this unsolved issue casts a massive cloud over Lively's legal plan. If her case has been hanging in the air, and the uncertainty about Slate's involvement may become the last thing which brings it all to a halt. The controversy is taking an even more dark turn, as Blake Lively tries to frame the entire issue as a fight between feminists against sexual harassment in the workplace. Invoking this #MeToo movement as an ointment, she's trying to divert attention away from the glaring contradictions within her personal narrative, depicting herself as the subject of an underlying problem. However, the reality suggests that the opposite is true. The team of Baldoni does not allow this tale to be unaddressed. They claim that the behavior wasn't really predatory, however. They argue that his actions were misinterpreted and an obvious expression of his culture and emotional receptivity rather than any type of illegality. The current situation isn't just one-off personal disputes, but an entire Hollywood dispute that's rekindled heated arguments over the power of gender within the film sector. This is where things become risky. Some critics are raising the alarm. The false allegations made by Lively don't only hurt Baldoni's credibility, they also harm those who are actually survivors of harassers. If her accusations are based upon exaggeration and selective narrative, what does this mean to actual victims? The kind of slander sets an unforgiving precedent which may make it more difficult to have legitimate claims treated with respect in the near future. Instead of encouraging honest conversations about respect and consent, this kind of nonsense only skews the reality and confuses the waters to make it even more difficult for people to understand.
Revealed the context of these texts because they did look more nefarious, but the context, if you read the full exchange, shows that Justin's publicists are saying it doesn't even matter if it's not true.
There's also the slow dance sequence, Blake's claimed proof of the misconduct. Let's face it, this was nothing more than a clear distractor. In accusing Baldoni of making inappropriate intimate gestures and transforming the consensual scripted event into a tool to support her argument. The problem? The evidence isn't flimsy. Video evidence is clear that she was fully involved, even taking part in certain acts she is now claiming were made to her. What exactly does that suggest? This means that her whole claims of non-consent are swept away by the weight of cold factual evidence. Instead of reporting workplace misconduct, it's her own self-defense as someone who is willing to alter to suit her. The longer this goes along, the more clear it appears that it's not just about justice. It's all about controlling. However, with every new detail, the holes in the carefully constructed story get bigger and deeper. Her team hasn't stopped. In the face of clear, constant proof, they've proved very clear and loud that the film was meant to be intimate right from the beginning. What is the so-called expert who was endorsed by The Hollywood Reporter? A mere actor, carefully selected to enhance Blake Lively's account of the story. Although he has no first-hand details of what transpired at the scene, what this whole incident isn't a simple assertion, but a series of manipulating. Blake's numerous attempts to alter truth reveal that this wasn't about legitimate concern for the workplace. The issue was control of the story. In lieu of recognizing the evidence which directly challenges her assertions, she redoubles her efforts, making herself appear victimized as she buries the factual evidence that does not support her narrative. In the end, at the conclusion, it's not about justice. It's about a desperate need to be heard. Blake Lively's fictional soap production of selective editing, overinflated claims, and plain deceit is an attempt at last to a place in the world which is now demanding accountability. The thing is, the truth is always revealed. This is the end of this particular episode. If you like the breakdown, be sure to follow us on Facebook, join us, follow us, and click that bell to ensure you don't miss the next dive. Comment below and tell us your thoughts. Are the public finally seeing through this? Watch out for the next.